General Bradford Lane looked at Danny Strome the way career military men sometimes looked at civilian nurses. Like she was temporary furniture placed in his room by people with too much time on their hands. She was reaching past him to adjust the drip line on his IV when he said it, the words loose and easy, like a man who'd never had reason to edit himself. "What are you, a candy striper?" He almost smiled at his own joke. Then his eyes dropped to her forearm. The smile didn't fade so much as evaporate. His face went through something she had never seen on a decorated 4-star general. A sudden, total blankness, as if every thought he'd been carrying had been wiped clean by a single image. His mouth stayed open. His eyes didn't move. Danny pulled her sleeve down. She finished checking the drip line. "Your potassium is low," she said. "Try to eat the crackers." She walked out of room 14 before he could form a single word. Cook County Trauma Center didn't attract generals as a rule. It attracted whatever the city sent through its doors. Overdoses, crashes, gunshot wounds, the full wreckage of a city of 3 million going about its business at speed. Danny Strome had worked the trauma floor for 4 years, and in that time she had stopped noticing the noise. She had a talent for stillness inside chaos that her colleagues found either admirable or unsettling, depending on their temperament. General Lane had arrived 2 days earlier in the back of a private ambulance, transferred from Northwestern Memorial after a cardiac event, complicated by injuries from a low-speed collision on I-90. The accident itself was nothing. A fender tap, bruised ribs, a cut above the eyebrow. The arrhythmia was something else. He was 61, fit for his age but not exempt from the arithmetic of stress and time. He'd been scheduled for an ablation procedure in 3 weeks. The arrhythmia had decided not to wait. In his first 48 hours at Cook County, General Lane had reduced one charge nurse to tears, accused the attending cardiologist of malpractice in front of a full audience of residents, and attempted twice to reach the hospital administrator by demanding someone bring him a real phone. Apparently, the one on his bedside table did not qualify. He was a man accustomed to rooms that reorganized themselves around his presence, and the trauma floor at Cook County had not reorganized itself. Dr. Ansel Crow, the floor's attending physician, and a man with the tired patience of someone who had seen everything twice, appeared at the nurse's station on the morning of day 3, and looked at Danny with the expression of someone about to ask a favor he felt bad about. "He's asking for someone new," Crow said. "He's asked for someone new 3 times. He threw his breakfast tray this morning." Danny finished charting without looking up. "Did it hit anything?" "The wall." "Then he's fine." She capped her pen. "What do you need, Ansel?" Crow exhaled through his nose. "You're the only one on this floor he hasn't managed to rattle. I watched him dress down 2 techs and a first-year resident before 8 a.m. You walked in yesterday to change his bandage, and he went completely quiet. I don't know what you did." "I didn't do anything," Danny said. "I just didn't react." "That's what I mean. Go back in." She considered it for a moment. Then she picked up his chart and went. Room 14 smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee, and the particular frustration of a man confined to a bed against his will. General Lane was sitting up when she entered, his silver hair combed, his jaw set, his eyes tracking her from the door, with the practiced attention of someone who never let anything enter his field of vision without assessing it first. He had abandoned the hospital gown at some point and stuffed it behind the pillow. On the bedside tray was a stack of papers he'd apparently had someone bring him. He looked like a man staging a small personal rebellion against the fact of his own hospitalization. "They sent you again," he said. "I offered," Danny said, which was close enough to true. She moved to his vitals display, scanning the overnight readouts. His rhythm had been stable since the procedure, but the cardiologist had noted a pattern of stress-related spikes that correlated almost perfectly with the hours the general was awake and arguing with people. "You're from the Midwest," Lane said, watching her. "Indiana, originally. How long have you been a nurse?" 7 years, 4 here. He picked up one of his papers, looked at it, put it down. "You're too calm for this floor." Danny said nothing. "Most people get nervous when I push," Lane continued. "You don't. I've worked in louder rooms than this one." He looked at her then, really looked at her, the way he probably looked at a piece of intelligence that wasn't adding up the way it should. He was a general. Pattern recognition was second nature. "Where?" he asked. She met his eyes steadily, different places. He accepted that. She could see him filing it, not dismissing it, just storing it for later. "My potassium," he said. "How low?" "Low enough to matter. I'd like to add a supplement to your IV drip. It'll take about an hour." She waited. "Is that all right?" He looked at her like the question surprised him. Then he said, "Yes, that's fine." She stayed quiet while she set it up, and Lane stayed quiet while she worked, which, she had noticed, was the only version of General Bradford Lane that could exist in a room, either filling every inch of it with noise or watching in a silence that felt almost peaceful by comparison. It was the 4th time she'd been in his room in 2 days, and the 4th time she'd kept her sleeves down. The crash happened at 2:17 in the morning. Danny was at the station reviewing labs when the telemetry alarm on room 14 went from a stable green pulse to a jagged, screaming red line. She was moving before the tone finished its first cycle. Down the hall at a pace just below a run, pushing through the door to find Lane writhing in the sheets, his face sheened with sweat, one hand locked around the bed rail so hard his knuckles had gone white. "Stay with me," she said immediately, hitting the call button. "General, look at me." His eyes found hers. They were glassy but tracking. "I can't." He choked on whatever he was trying to say. "The rhythm. Something's." "I know, we've got it." She reached past him to pull the crash cart closer, fingers already moving across the controls. Behind her, she could hear feet in the hallway. She didn't turn. His rhythm on the monitor was a mess. Not V-fib, not quite, but close enough to make her throat tighten. She reached for the defibrillator pads, and in the motion of reaching, in the precise moment that she stretched her left arm across his chest to place the first pad, her sleeve rode up past her elbow. She felt Lane go completely still. She was focused on the pads, on the rhythm, on the sequence she'd run 100 times. But something in the quality of his stillness penetrated even her concentration. She glanced down. Her forearm was fully exposed to the light. The tattoo wasn't large. Most people who'd seen it in 4 years at Cook County had assumed it was decorative. A compass rose, they called it. The kind of thing someone got in their 20s and vaguely regretted. 8 points, faded at the edges from age and sun, but the needle at the center didn't point north. It pointed to a specific bearing, and beneath the rose, in small block print that you had to be close to read, 32.6N, 65.4E, and below that, smaller still, V7. Lane's hand came off the bed rail. "God," he whispered. "Sir, stay still." His voice broke. "That's a Viper 7 coordinate." The crash team came through the door behind her. Danny finished placing the pad, called out the rhythm, coordinated the team through the next 6 minutes with the practiced authority of someone who had done this in rooms without electricity, in the dark, in the dirt. Lane's rhythm corrected. His color came back. The monitor settled into something that sounded, finally, like a heartbeat. When the team cleared out and the room fell quiet again, Lane was lying flat, exhausted, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. His voice, when he spoke, had lost every sharp edge it had carried for 2 days. "Where did you get that tattoo?" he said. Not a question. Danny looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Get some rest, General. We can talk in the morning." His eyes came to hers. Whatever he was feeling was so large, it seemed to press against the inside of his face, looking for a way out. "Viper 7 went dark in Kandahar," he said, "in 2009. The whole unit." Danny said nothing. "I was the firebase commander they were running support for. I was there." His voice cracked on the last word. "I filed a commendation. They told me everyone was Kaya. There was no one to give it to." She turned off the overhead light, leaving only the soft blue glow of the monitors. "Sleep," she said quietly. "I'll be here in the morning." She walked out, but she didn't go far. Danny stood in the corridor for 3 minutes doing nothing, except listening to the sound of the hospital at night. The distant chime of an elevator, the hiss of the ventilation system, the low murmur of voices at the far station. She pressed her back against the wall and looked at the ceiling, and let herself feel for a moment the cold weight of what had just happened. She had been careful for 15 years. Careful about her sleeves, and careful about the coordinates, and careful about the names she used, and the jobs she took, and the city she chose. She had been careful in the specific, exhausting way that a person is careful when they know exactly what carelessness costs. She had watched it cost her team everything. Kandahar. 2009, Operation Iron Veil. 8 members of a classified JSOC detachment, operating under the call sign Viper 7, inserted into the Arghandab River Valley to intercept a weapons transfer and document the chain of custody. What they found instead was a cache of American origin equipment, javelin systems, communications gear, encrypted radios, being transferred not by insurgents, but by men working directly for Colonel Douglas Huxley, the regional intelligence coordinator. Huxley was running a private supply operation, trading hardware for intelligence access, a side arrangement that had made him powerful and had gotten 6 Afghan informants killed when his partners decided to simplify their business. Viper 7's commander had radioed the discovery up the chain. Within 4 hours, their position had been transmitted to hostile forces, and they were taking fire from 3 sides. Danny had been the unit medic. She was 26 years old. She moved from body to body in the dark while the world came apart around her, doing what she had been trained to do, which was keep people alive long enough to matter. It hadn't been enough. She lost 6 of her 7 teammates in a single night. The airstrike came at dawn. Official records stated it was a response to insurgent activity. It was thorough enough to bury everything. Huxley filed the paperwork declaring Viper 7 KIA, expunged their operational records, and closed the file on a unit that had never officially existed. Danny had survived by accident and luck, and 17 hours of crawling through a drainage tunnel while her neck wound clotted on its own because she had nobody left to bandage it for her. She surfaced 2 days later in a village 7 miles east, dehydrated and half dead, knowing with total clarity that the moment she made contact with any official channel, she was finished. Huxley had the reach, and he had every reason to finish what the airstrike started. So she didn't surface. She built a new life, name by name, credential by credential. The way you build anything, slowly, carefully, with attention paid to every detail. Danny Strom. Indiana, 7 years of nursing. No family affiliations, no loose threads, no one who looked too hard. She had never talked about Iron Veil. She had told herself it was because she was one person and Huxley was entrenched, and the weight of the institution would bury her before she finished her first sentence. She had told herself this often enough that she had almost started to believe it. Now Bradford Lane, a 4-star general who had commanded the firebase that Viper 7 died protecting, was lying in room 14 staring at the ceiling with the expression of a man whose world had just been reorganized. Danny went back to her charts. In the morning, she came back. Lane was awake. He had not slept. She could tell. The lines around his eyes were deeper, and there was a quality to his attention that you only see in people who have spent the night thinking hard about something they cannot resolve. He watched her come in. He waited until she'd settled into the chair beside the bed. "Tell me," he said. So she did. She told him about the cache. She told him about the radio call, and the coordinates leaking, and the sound of the firefight in the dark. She told him about Huxley's name on the equipment manifests, about the 2 minutes she'd had to look at the crates before everything started, and the photographic memory she had spent 15 years wishing she didn't have. She told him about the drainage tunnel and the village, and the 2 days she'd spent deciding whether to surface. Lane listened without interrupting. He was good at that, she noticed. The same quality that could fill a room with noise could also hold it perfectly still when he chose. When she finished, the silence between them lasted a long time. "Huxley," Lane said finally. "Douglas Huxley. He's with the Pentagon now, senior advisor to the Deputy Secretary of Defense." Lane exhaled through his nose. "Of course he is." 3 weeks ago, Danny said, watching him carefully, someone filed a formal request to review the after-action reports from Iron Veil. I have a contact who monitors certain document requests, a precaution I've kept for years. The moment that request hit the system, I started watching my exits. Lane's jaw tightened. That was me. I've been trying to pull those files for a decade. Every time I get close, I hit a wall. I submitted a new request through Armed Services Committee channels. He looked at her. I wanted to find out who was there. I wanted to commend them. Whatever records I could find. And Huxley's system caught it. Yes, he was quiet again. When I was transferred here from Northwestern, the accident on I-90. I think the timing is not coincidental, Danny said. I don't know for certain, but I know how he works. Lane absorbed this with the composure of a man doing large, fast arithmetic in his head. He didn't look afraid. He looked like someone calibrating. Your contact, he said, the one monitoring the requests, are they secure? As of this morning. And the documentation, what you saw in Kandahar, any of it preserved? I have copies, Danny said, stored in 3 separate locations, including partial equipment manifests I photographed on my phone in the 4 minutes before the firefight started. She held his gaze. I've had them for 15 years. Lane looked at her with an expression she didn't have a name for. You've been carrying that the whole time. Yes. Why didn't you? Because Huxley is not someone you hand a single filing to and wait, she said. You have to move all at once, through channels he can't intercept, with a principle he can't discredit. I was one person with expunged records and a name nobody recognized. She let that sit for a moment, until now. Lane's phone, the actual phone, not the hospital handset, lit up on his bedside table. He glanced at it and went still. "My chief of staff," he said, his voice dropping. "He's flagged 2 individuals on the parking garage camera feed. They entered through the service level. Tactical dress, no insignia." Danny was already standing. She moved fast and quiet through the corridor toward the stairwell, mapping what she knew about the floor the same way she had always mapped terrain. Exits, obstructions, sightlines, things that could be used. The trauma ward at this hour had a skeleton crew. She went down 1 flight, assessed, came back up. They were coming from the South Service entrance. She returned to room 14 with 90 seconds to spare. "Stay in the bed," she told Lane. "Do not get up regardless of what happens. You are still in arrhythmia risk, and I will not spend 20 minutes restarting your heart after this is over." He almost said something. She gave him a look that stopped it. She positioned herself behind the door. The 2 men who came through it 30 seconds later were good. She could tell immediately the spacing between them, the economy of motion, the way the point man swept the muzzle of his suppressed weapon across the room without rushing. They weren't private security contractors. They were operators, the real kind, and they knew exactly how to enter a room and clear it in under 4 seconds. They were not prepared for Danny Strom. She had been a JSOC medic for 3 years and a combat operator for 2 before that. And the thing about that training that stays longest is not the techniques but the patience, the ability to wait at exactly the right angle, to let the target commit to a direction before you move. She waited until the lead man was 3 steps past the door threshold, his attention fixed on the bed, and then she moved. She took the second man first. She wrapped her right arm around his throat from behind, using the door frame for leverage, and applied pressure to the carotid with controlled, deliberate force, the way she had been taught at Bragg, and the way she had done it exactly once before, in a very different room in a very different country. He went limp in 11 seconds. She lowered him without sound. The lead man heard the change in the room and turned. She was already inside his reach. She controlled the weapon, a suppressed Glock, standard configuration for this type of work, by grabbing the slide with her left hand and pushing it offline while simultaneously driving the heel of her right palm into the man's chin with enough force to snap his head back against the wall. He didn't go down. He was good. He fought through it, grabbing for her with his free hand, and she let him, using his grip to spin him off balance and drive his weapon arm against the doorframe until he released the pistol. It clattered to the floor. She kicked it toward the bed. "Get that," she told Lane. He had it in his hand in 4 seconds. Whatever else General Bradford Lane was, he was not slow. The lead operative was still functioning. Danny ended it quickly, and without ceremony, a knee to the lateral side of his left leg to collapse his stance, followed by a precise strike to the mastoid process that left him face down on the linoleum. Not unconscious, but done enough to stay there. The room went quiet. Danny's left hand was bleeding. She'd cut it on the slide during the disarm. She wrapped it in a section torn from her scrub pocket without breaking stride and knelt beside the lead man, pulling the encrypted radio from his vest. The earpiece crackled. A voice she had spent 15 years not hearing. "Viper team, report. Do you have confirmation?" She pressed the transmit button. "Viper team is down," she said. "Hello, Douglas." A pause, long enough to hear him breathe. "Who is this?" Not a question, a thing said while a mind raced. "You reported me Kia in December of 2009, Danny said. "You were wrong." Another pause. When Huxley's voice returned, it had changed. The official authority stripped away, something smaller and colder underneath. "Whatever you think you have." "I don't think. I have equipment manifests with your authorization codes. I have radio intercept logs from the 12 hours before the Iron Veil ambush documenting the coordinate leak. I have a chain of custody on weapons transfers going back to 2007. She kept her voice flat and even, and as of 43 minutes ago, all of it is in the hands of the Senate Armed Services Committee and the DoD Inspector General. Transmitted through a secure channel by a 4-star general currently sitting in a hospital bed, pointing your asset's own weapon at the wall. She glanced at Lane. He was, in fact, holding the Glock with the particular steadiness of a man who had been waiting his entire career to point something at the right target. "You have no standing," Huxley said, his voice now barely controlled. "You're expunged. You're a ghost record. No one will. I have 15 years of documentation, and a general with 4 stars and a functioning heart," Danny said. "You should call a lawyer, Douglas. They'll be at your office before you finish dialing." She set the radio on the floor and pressed her heel through it. The casing fractured. The transmission died. From somewhere outside, distant at first, and then gathering, the wail of military police sirens began rising toward the building. Lane lowered the Glock. He looked at the 2 men on his floor, then at Danny standing in the center of his room with a wrapped hand and an expression so calm it had moved somewhere past unsettling into something that resembled its own kind of grace. The monitors were still running. His heart was beating steadily. "You need your hand looked at," he said. "It's fine. It's bleeding." "Generals," she said, moving to the supply cabinet beside his bed, "are not known for their medical assessments." He watched her clean and wrap it herself, one-handed, with the automatic efficiency of someone who has field-dressed worse. Outside, the sirens were closer now. The rotating lights from the QRF vehicles out of Fort Sheridan were beginning to paint the window blinds in alternating red and blue. "You should go," Lane said. She looked at him. "Your records are still sealed," he said. "If they find you in this room, there's no protocol for what you are. It'll be months of depositions, and Huxley's lawyers will use every minute of that delay to muddy the evidentiary chain." He met her eyes steadily. "Go. I'll hold the room. The documentation you transmitted will do the work." She picked up her badge from the counter where it had fallen. She looked at the 2 men on the floor, breathing, both of them, which was the outcome she'd intended. She looked at Lane. "Your rhythm will be unstable for the next 6 to 8 hours, she said. "Don't let them discharge you to make room." "I'm a 4-star general in a county trauma center," Lane said. "They are not discharging me." "Good." She moved toward the door. "And eat the crackers." "Strom." She stopped. He moved slowly, the painful, careful movement of a man working around bruised ribs and the aftermath of a cardiac event, and pushed himself upright. All the way upright, spine straight, shoulders squared. It cost him something visible. He did it anyway. Then General Bradford Lane, a man who had commanded 40,000 troops across 3 theaters of war and had not bowed his head to anyone since his own commissioning day at West Point, raised his right hand to his brow. Clean, precise. The kind of salute that takes a lifetime to earn the right to give. On behalf of the United States Army, he said, his voice low and completely steady. And on behalf of every man at that firebase who came home because your team held the line, thank you, Strom. Danny stood in the doorway. The thing about carrying something for 15 years is that you forget what it weighs. You adjust, you build your posture around the weight until the weight becomes invisible. And then someone sees it, really sees it, the full shape and size of what you've been carrying, and your body remembers all at once. She breathed through it. Then she raised her hand to her brow, sharp and true, the way Sergeant First Class Danielle Strom of the 1st SFAD Delta had been trained to do at Fort Bragg in a different life that turned out not to be as gone as she had believed. She held it for 3 full seconds. It was an honor, General, she said. She walked out. By the time the military police cleared the stairwells and secured the floor, Room 14 held 1 decorated general, 2 restrained operatives, and a Glock that Lane reported finding on the floor. The nurse assigned to the room had ended her shift. The admissions system showed her badge swiping out through the employee exit at 3:04 a.m. Nothing else on Danny Strom flagged in the Cook County database. But 6 weeks later, when the Senate Armed Services Committee released its preliminary findings on Operation Iron Veil, and when the DoD Inspector General announced a formal investigation into Douglas Huxley, now former senior Pentagon advisor, escorted from his office building at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning by 2 federal marshals. A specific line appeared in the classified annex of the committee's initial report. Most of the annex was redacted, but 1 line had been allowed to remain at the specific written request of General Bradford Lane. Primary evidentiary documentation provided by surviving member of JSOC Viper 7, designation V7, status amended, not Kia. In a trauma bay at Cook County on a Tuesday night that looked like every other Tuesday night, a nurse with a compass rose tattooed on her left forearm worked the 6 to 6 shift without incident. She triaged a construction worker with a broken collarbone. She held the hand of an elderly woman waiting for a scan. She drank bad coffee at 3 in the morning and charted until her eyes burned. And for the first time in 15 years, Danny Strom worked the night with her sleeves rolled up.